And if everyone could please silence your phones. Now is that magical moment. We are live. Okay. So, welcome everyone to the launch of JesusDevil. I love JesusDevil as one word. It's a beautiful thing. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum. For those of you who are here for the first time, the Bureau is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service we provide, is holding this space for queer culture. So we opened in 2012. We've been here at the center since 2014. We survived the pandemic, and so did you, because you're here. We are an all-volunteer organization. Tonight we have Tannen Reckling, and we have Bella Florence helping us out. That's how we make this boat, keep this boat afloat. So we have a suggested donation of $10. I'm going to pass this bag around. Give what you can, if you can. You can also give on Venmo at BGSQD, which are the letters all around you, or for those of you who are online. But if money is tight and you're planning on buying a book, you should hold on to your money and buy a book. And if you can't give anything, just smile. Thank you so much. And before I introduce Alexis, I just wanted to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. And now I'm going to introduce both Alexis and Jay Wortham, who will be joining Alexis in conversation after the reading. So Jay Wortham, they, them, is a sound healer, Reiki practitioner, herbalist, and community care worker oriented towards healing, justice, and liberation. They are also a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine and co-host of the podcast Still Processing with Kimberly Drew. They co-edited Black Futures, a visual anthology and compendium of radical, imaginative, and provocative art by contemporary Black creators. Alexis DeVoe is a Black queer feminist independent scholar whose internationally known work is published in 6 languages. She has been publishing fiction, poetry, plays, memoirs, and children's literature since 1973, and her work is anthologized in numerous collections. DeVoe is the author of Yavo and Warrior Poet, a biography of Audre Lorde, and was tenured faculty at the University of Buffalo Department of Women's Studies for more than 20 years, mentoring a new generation of interdisciplinary scholars of Black, feminist, and queer studies. Yeah. Please give a very warm welcome to Alexis. To have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back here. When the publisher said, do you want to go? I was like, hell yeah. I love this place.
Yes.
Sweetie.
Yes.
I'm going to be reading from, well, first of all, thank you all for coming. It's great to be back home, and it's great to see home in your faces. So I really appreciate that you're here tonight. And I appreciate that we're here in the month of Pride and Pride celebration, and that we can do Pride in ways that are not corporate, that have to do with who we really are and what we really want to be about. So I appreciate that you're here. So as Greg said, I'm going to be reading from JesusDevil, the Parables. Thank you back there, Stephen. JesusDevil, the Parables centers upon a Black queer spirit who lives in human form. The spirit's name is Phil, and Phil undergoes 9 experiences or 9 parables that have to do with, I would say, have to do with the larger question of what does it mean to be Black and human. And so tonight I'm going to read for about 20 minutes or so. And then Jay and I are going to talk, and then we're going to talk with you. I'll read from an excerpt from one of the parables. And the title of this parable is The Nigerian Woman's Dick. Okay, relax. Relax. It was in a time in New Orleans, a city that shared a rebellion narrative and origin story, if you will, with other Black geographies. New York City, Durham, Tulsa, the colony San Miguel de Guadalupe in 1526. It was known to its inhabitants, though they had no need to say aloud, as a geography where Black people lived, but not the word impossible, as when a noun becomes a verb. And there lived in this time a Nigerian woman who awoke one morning after a deep sleep. It was gone again. It was nerve-wracking how the statue came and went at will, it seemed. To the Nigerian woman, it did what it pleased, without regard, apparently, for the distress it caused her, which finally drove the Nigerian woman to her good friend's door in the sweltering heat that morning. The peephole latch clicked. With a frown, Phil opened her door. "What?" Phil said, with nothing on except a half-buttoned white shirt. "My sister, I need your help," the Nigerian woman said. "I'm a little busy right now," Phil said. "Oh," said the Nigerian woman, who went by the name Aguta, peeked over Phil's shoulder. "Who is here with you?" "None of your business," Phil said. "So, are we keeping secrets now?" Aguta folded muscular, tattooed arms in front of his attrahent breasts. The Nigerian woman was a towering man in a pink caftan. Pink colored her mustache lips and dangled in teardrop earrings. Aguta had not shaved. The delicate stubble was flecked with gray. "Okay, my sister, okay. But," Aguta pointed a bejeweled finger as he backed away, "I leave you with the words of my good friend, Mr. Chenoweth Achebe, quote, that we are surrounded by deep mysteries is known to all but the incurably ignorant," unquote. In truth, Aguta had never met Chenoweth Achebe, but he thought of the celebrated and outspoken Nigerian novelist as an open window through which the proverbs of his culture came in like fresh air. And because he was a conduit for air, Achebe was a friend. Phil sniggered and shut her door, but she knew Aguta did not like to be ignored, for indeed he was a dependable friend. He'd paid her overdue rent on more than one occasion. He'd penetrated her hard and quick as she asked him to while wearing a dress. He never asked for anything, but he was queen of the long and narrow double shotgun he and Phil lived in side by side, and she knew that. So it was no surprise the following morning when Aguta knocked again. Phil opened her door a crack, was just enough to see she was naked this time. The Nigerian woman pushed open the door and swept past Phil, his blue caftan ballooned behind. Inside, Phil's place was still. Her house hadn't awakened yet. A hand jutted out from the first room, a robe dangling from it. As Phil reached for the robe, Aguta rolled his eyes, then he spun around quick as a flying cat. He spun out the door and back to his place. What is going on? Phil demanded. She stood in Aguta's doorway. I am at the end of the rope, Aguta confessed. Why? Phil asked. Aguta sighed. I need tea. So he brewed a pot of lemon balm as he relayed this story to his dear sister. As you know, Oya has been my family's Orisha for generations. When my dear mother, for whom I was daughter, went to the ancestors, Oya came to me. To keep her close, I made an altar right there. Aguta pointed to the corner of the room where an empty space, a hole on the floor, was surrounded by an earthenware pot, a machete, brown glass beads spilled among red ones, and a freshly lit purple candle. One day she is here, Aguta continued. The next, she is gone. Phil eyeballed the spot where the statue usually stood, then Aguta, then the empty spot again. She glanced about. Maybe he'd moved it. Maybe it was just misplaced. Aguta sipped his tea. I cannot tell you how she goes or where. The Nigerian woman sighed, then turned to Phil. Oya is gone, my sister. What shall I do? And with that, the Nigerian woman sobbed into his tea. His tears turned the pungent liquid solid, and eyeing it carefully, she put her teacup down. As she'd come to know lately, that everything in life could not be understood. Phil did feel sorry for Aguta. Truth be told, though, she had something else on her mind, that unfinished business in her bedroom. But seeing Aguta in such a state, she quietly said, I cannot help you, sister, but I know someone who can. And later that morning, Phil introduced the Nigerian woman to her bedroom company. This is Theme Leroy, Phil said, a private detective. The detective was an indigo black, her skin iridescent. Her stubby blue-black dreads writhed with a slight movement. She wore a three-piece red sharkskin suit. Oh my, Aguta shrieked, a private dick. I'm just reading the excerpt, just that. Theme gave Phil some side-eye, then grinned, which made Phil want. The detective took a small notebook and an expensive-looking pen from her jacket's inside pocket. Let's start from the beginning, Theme Leroy pursued the matter. Well, the Nigerian woman scrutinized this detective, seemed a bit aloof, really absent of warmth, like a piece of information that presents itself as objective reality and calls itself fact, which suggests true, but what is true travels a slippery binary. Some facts are false. The Nigerian woman sat in a chair and sucked a dramatic breath. When one is born, she began, we say one chooses ahead and is then endowed with a cosmic essence, the soul's matrix. This essence can be experienced in its natural manifestation, its spirit form, as water or wind, as fire or tree. Theme looked up from a scribble of notes. This magic wasn't the usual kind. The magic she was accustomed to boiled in her blood. It had an insideness to it, but she long wondered what other magics, other ways might be possible. Aguta kept talking. After a moment, the detective asked, can you describe this Orisha? You will see she is a statue, Aguta said. Very tiny, Phil chimed in, then indicated with her hand low to the ground. Yes, Aguta said, her breasts are small as well. Aguta's hands pressed against the bulge of his own. She wears a necklace and a flat crown in the shape of an M. Anything else? Bill Theme said, scribbling. She's made of bronze, Bill offered. Oh, so she's expensive, Theme said. Any chance someone came in here and took her? Aguta protested. Oya disappears and Oya appears at will. Oya has destroyed my peace. What a goddess. Yes, Theme said, matter of fact. But what were the facts here? Was the evidence of disappearance the empty hole that wasn't, it seemed, visible? Were the facts and the mystery enveloping those facts antithetical? A life of shadowing mysteries had shown Theme Leroy that facts could, often did, contradict each other. As such, they could be competing truths. Though contradiction did not define truth, she knew that. To search for the truth was to search for an absolute. Competing truths or facts were useful to shaping complexities rather than absolutes. Verifying facts was another story. That often meant Theme had to be subjective rather than objective. That way she could see facts as artifacts and the context and the argument for them as co-partners of facts. On the one hand, the improbable was always possible. On the second hand, a private investigator was like any other researcher, a dog with a bone. On the third hand, there was the state of being improbable, of being both this and that. The state of being lively luminous was something Theme Leroy intrinsically understood. One day, after she turned drinking age, Theme walked into the Fabulous, a neighborhood bar between neighborhoods. Some folks sat around the long purple bar chatting and drinking. Preach Queen was sitting cross-legged on a bar stool. His lecture was in full swing. Y'all know what I'm saying. Y'all know what I'm saying. And I ain't the first. The first was the late and brilliant Barbara Christian. Let me bring some history up in here. Rise up, Barbara Christian, Black feminists. Most of our mothers, some of our daddies too, is Black feminists. They may not call themselves that, but ask them about rent. Ask them about care and college before it. Ask them about those piss-ass jobs, about what we call theory in the flesh. Preach Queen paused while the bartender, Overness, poured him another whiskey. Theme inched towards the less occupied side of the bar. She sat next to two men. Preach Queen sipped his drink and smacked his lips. Though his government name was Nugent Baldwin Bean, he liked that he was known here by a different persona. In the university's whiteness, where he was the tenured Professor Bean and specialized in Black geographies, he was the invisible man. But here and loved, he exercised his skills in the service of his people. That PhD was only a tool to a life without lack. It was freedom for himself and for all those who looked like, talked like, thought, and fucked like him outside the box. Ask your people what power is, what it ain't. Preach Queen signified. She, somebody yelled out. They'll tell you from their own understanding. Preach Queen let his tears flow. Their own understanding of the multiple, the simultaneous ways we've been beat down, beat on, beat up, and we still making beauty. A woman in big round sunglasses testified. Y'all don't even know. Preach Queen, one of the men sitting next to Theme, hollered, oh, don't get me started. Preach Queen answered, but let me raise up some history, because Barbara Christian was a prophet. I know y'all know what a prophet do. Speak in tongues, the man replied. Y'all know what I'm saying. Barbara Christian wrote it. Our people do theory. We know how to theorize. We know how to theorize. Openness slid a flirty hand over her bald head, tugged at her bow tie, and strutted about to the delight and witness of the bar's patrons. At last, Preach Queen laid eyes on the newcomer. Well, what have we here? He directed the room's attention to the blue-black stranger. His smile was big, toothy, genuinely welcoming. He'd said what instead of who on purpose, Theme sensed. Openness appeared with a fresh bottle of whiskey and an empty glass. She poured a drink and pushed the glass in front of Theme. Preach Queen waited until he had everyone's full attention again. When we tell our stories, he continued, when we pass on our folk tales and proverbs and parables that were passed on to us by mouth, we theorize the flesh. When we trickster our way out this daily nonsense, we theorize. We theorize. Y'all know what we do. We make us some words. When these don't suit us, don't express what's going on, we keep it fresh, keep it live. Because truth be told, we prefer the dynamic to the fixed. How else we survived all this abuse? There was a chorus, there was a chorus. All this brutality, you already know. All this murdered and shot down and worked to death. What been done to our bodies? Preach Queen answered the chorus. To the many ways we define them, how we know them, our own and differing Black bodies. And then Preach Queen paused. He took a long, slow gaze at the faces around the bar. They were expectant, ready now. So he leapt off his stool on top of the bar's top. He pranced between the glasses and ashtrays underfoot. Theme's mouth fell open at the spectacular sight of him. The stubs that were her blue-black dreadlocks trembled with excitement. Am I not beauty? Preach Queen intoned. Am I not beauty in this sweet black dress? He let more tears flow. Yes, you is. Am I not beauty in these thigh-high black boots? Boy, please. Openness felt the lecture like a sermon heating in her body. Am I not theory in the flesh with my indigo tipped fingers and my blue lipstick? We see you, Lord. We see you. I am my own Black, Preach Queen proclaimed atop the bar. He stopped in front of Theme, bent his long self slow and low and into her face. His lips vibrated a breath away from hers. Everybody up in here is theory in the flesh, honey, he said, and snapped his fingers. And what was human in the bar was suddenly peacock and flamingo. After a moment, though, they all turned back to human. Preach Queen slipped off the bar and went back to his stool as the room filled with hoots and laughter and raucous applause. Preach Queen raised his glass to his students. He blew them kisses as he twirled about. He had talked and he'd been seen. In here, in this other universe, critical love was a complex possibility. From that day forward, Theme was a regular at the Fabulous. And because of the flamboyant philosopher, she learned to live in her body the way she did, neither binary nor reconstructed. What was the word for hybrid, or nature's desire for difference, for particularity? Because nature desires the impermissible and abhors the prescriptive. So at Preach Queen's elbow, Theme learned to theorize desire was the only gender, and Blackness itself was genitalia, to be pleasured and revered, alone and with, and referring to the self as we was more acceptable to the historical soul than the designation I.
Thank you.
the evangelist. My Clark Kent. Thank you, thank you.
You want some
Can we put
water?
that down?
Yeah, is it water?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was incredible. Just one more round of applause for Alexis. Really profound and exciting. To keep track of the time. So we're gonna talk for a little bit and there'll be room for questions and answers. I mean, you'll be offering answers, you'll be asking questions. So just to kind of keep that in mind as we do our thing. Okay. Oh my gosh, where to begin? Well, I think I wanted to start this conversation off by hearing more about your process. I remember visiting you in New Orleans and hearing about this work as it was coming together, and it really just sounded like, I mean, you wrote it in the intro, but it just really sounded like such a spirit practice and almost like a divination. And I just would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, maybe to begin.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. This is a work that came without benefit of an outline, for example. That's a technology that writers make use of, but this work came on its own. Often I would be transcribing the parable that I was working with, and then I could hear the other two waiting in the wings. And so I understood that the way that I was writing had to do with listening. It wasn't about me particularly constructing the work. It was about me hearing the work coming. And I came to understand that the work itself was coming from someplace else, that I was the vehicle through which it was happening. And I was proud of that, but I also knew that it was in some ways difficult because sometimes something would come and sometimes nothing came. And I had to be okay with that. If a word came, if a couple of sentences, if a paragraph, if 10 pages came, whatever came, I had to be okay with that. And I had to feel blessed. I couldn't work against it because it really was about this relationship between the human and the spiritual, or the human form and the spirit form. And so Phil actually came right away. Phil was like, yo, sit down. Let me talk to you for a second. And I understood just from meeting Phil that Phil's talking required my listening. And I think I've said this to you before, I don't write by computer. I write with a fountain pen and a black and white, you know those black and white composition notebooks? I still use those. And in that way, I feel more in touch with, like I love to get ink on my fingers at the end of the day, whatever time the end of the day is. That to me is the evidence of the work itself. So there are lots of ways in which I understood myself, for this work in particular, to be a vehicle as opposed to the maker of.
And what do you think, what are your thoughts on how this methodology, which it is a type of technology, this, I imagine this kind of exchange and reception, how does it reflect or meet you where you're at right now in your creative practice and creative process and writing life, which has been long and illustrious?
Great question. I think it pushed me to decenter myself, to really, I'm not gonna lie, I got ego for days. So, but I think, no, yeah, right. Not possible, not possible. But I think it really forced me, encouraged me to, see myself as smaller in the universe of life. In the universe of things that are alive, to really have a different sense of where we are in that whole picture, because this is one of the things that we struggle with. we humans struggle with where we are in the whole picture. We have some notion that we're at the top, you know what I'm saying? But we're not. And part of that also meant really encountering this idea of what it means to be Black and human. Because historically in this culture, whatever is Black is not human. It's not, you know what I mean? And we can see that in the everyday realities of being Black. Whether you're on the subway and you're hungry and you're shouting out for food and somebody throws you in the chokehold and you're dead, to whether you are running somewhere in a neighborhood you don't belong in and you get accosted by 2 citizens or 3, however many it was, and then you're dead. Or you die from lack of the ability to construct your dreams, or you die from lack of food, you live in a food desert. I mean, there's so many ways in which we are informed, if you will, that we are not human. And so part of this work was really, I think, helping me to think about that a lot more. And to think about, well, what might be some of the answers to the question, what does it mean to be Black and human? And I'm not sure that I know the answers, but I really know the question because I've sat with it now for the many years that it took to create the work.
I was gonna ask, I mean, you kind of just answered it, but I was gonna ask you what the parables have been teaching you.
I think that thing that you said. I think also really recognize that Black people don't really live in this realm. We actually, we have a whole different reality. We're living a whole different reality. And I'm not trying to do like a hoodoo thing on you. I'm just saying that I've been thinking about that a lot. That we live in a different reality. And there are answers for us in that reality that if we're listening will come to this reality and be helpful. Those answers will be helpful. And also the answers to everything that we need are not necessarily coming from this realm. They may be coming through something like Phil or something like Phil's experiences. So I think that that's something that I've really spent some time trying to think about and articulate and recover for myself in some ways that help me to construct ways of dealing with today's everyday. Because every day is so fucked up. It's so difficult. Once you walk outside the door, your door, wherever your door is, you're just dealing with something that's crazy. It's really crazy. And we're humans, I think. We're afraid to use certain kind of language, but we are living out the days, as I understand. And so I'm trying to come up with, because I think the work is helping me to come up with what are, I'll use the word alternative, although I mean something else. What are alternative ways to living out Blackness and humanness in ways that will allow me to, and hopefully us, to thrive as opposed to simply survive. You live in survival for a long freaking time. That mode needs to be over. That just needs to be over. We can't keep doing it. We just can't. I mean, we can, but we can't. We shouldn't. We should move in some ways that allow us to really interrogate this idea we call freedom, because we are not free. I know we just celebrated Juneteenth, but come on.
I mean, something you say in the book as well is talking about how the parables in this work come from partially the imagination, but it's not imaginary. And so one of the things that strikes me listening to you read the parable and also working about you through this book and back and forth is thinking about the strength it takes to imagine something else and to try to manifest that and architect that. And so something I would really love to hear you speak on, if it feels right, is what is that process like of learning to listen inward, right? You're talking about the spirit of Phil coming through, you know, and I'm sitting here like, it's amazing to have the wherewithal, the confidence, the ability to actually be able to receive that, right? A lot of us would tune that out and be like, I don't know what that is. What are the practices and the ways of living, the things that you're doing to be able to live in this space? I heard you say alternative. It's not the right word, and I know what you mean, but to live in this other space of being welcome friends and family. Come on in, get comfortable. So glad you're here. Yeah, what are some of the practices, maybe perhaps rituals, ways of knowing, self-knowing, that you're cultivating to be able to live in this space?
That's a great question because I think it's complicated. It's complicated in the sense that, yes, I have altars, and yes, I go to my altars, and yes, I try to have a relationship with the artifacts of my altars, and I have at least 3 in the house, at least 3. And I think the room that I work in is an altar itself. I also really believe, because I'm older now and I'm seeing more and I can think about more, I really believe that my ancestors are here for me. I think they are here for me and they are keeping me alive right now. They are keeping me alive right now. And I don't think I'm the only one whose ancestors are here. I think there's some interaction with the ancestors that is required right now. Because I think they're, we always kind of construct the ancestors like they're doing our bidding. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're just here for us. Oh, I prayed to the ancestors and I got the job. Well, that's good, but that's a conversation that they are having, I believe, about us.
Yes.
And I think we might want to tap into those knowledges more. We are told that, the spiritual doesn't really matter. It's the material, it's the political, yada, yada, booty, booty. But we need to understand our relationships with the spiritual more. And we need to cultivate that knowledge more because it's there for us. And again, it requires us, not just me, but it requires us to listen. I think it was very hard. I think it was very hard for me. One, I had to, really rest the ego a little bit to be able to listen. Because we are taught that writing is the thing that you're doing. But in fact, I learned with this work that writing was the thing that was being done. And I was simply there to transcribe it. And I don't want to sound like I'm unhinged. I don't want to sound like I'm unhinged. But I have been thinking about it a lot for about a decade now. And I have been fortunate to be able to have lived long enough to have the time to think about it and the time to witness time in ways that have taught me how multidimensional being alive actually is.
You don't need me to say this, but you don't sound unhinged. You don't. And more is coming out right now about, Lucille Clifton's spirit writing and autonomous writing.
That's right. That's right.
Raina Magdalore,
Mhm.
I think I mispronounced her last name, so forgive me, my brain is a little tired, but you know, has been able to, with the permission of the family, write more about those practices. You know, the exhibition up at Princeton right now, maybe it just came down, of Toni Morrison's archives,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
seeing her writing about specifically Milkman and Song of Solomon,
Mhm.
it's channeling. It doesn't look like her other writing, you know, and so I think these are things that are tightly guarded because we do understand how our practices get pathologized and weaponized against us, but this is very much in this great Black feminist radical literary tradition. It's very much here with us today.
Thank you.
So just to say that, you don't need to say it, but just to say that, you know, this is what is done.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Also, you know, a good glass of wine does not.
It's called a libation and a spirit. For real.
You do not hurt.
I know that's right. We're oddly enough almost at the time to take questions from the audience. The time is flying by, so I want you all to get ready with your questions. But while that's happening, I did want to talk a little bit about the ways in which you are pressing up against ideas of body, ideas of gender, ideas of sex and sexual expression, and really language. I mean, one of the things that I love so much about this work is you are creating language or pulling in language that others have created that suits you and suits the work. And I was hoping you might talk a little bit more about those practices as a way of also resisting and refusing and not accepting and expanding the realms of what we've been given to work with.
Okay. One of the things I was hoping to show in that excerpt has to do with what we think of as masculinity. And how can we read masculinity or masculinities in ways that are more vibrant. I personally love a man in a dress, personally. Yeah, and I think just being able to have that freedom and to communicate that freedom is quite powerful. I also think that Preach Queen's tears are absolutely essential to his ability to communicate in that bar, to teach in that bar, which is why he gets all these responses. So one of the things I'm trying to do, is look at what we call masculinities, but also look at what we call femininity. And to see how these, what we call these binaries are constantly shifting in all of us all the time. So he puts her cup down. Any sentence like that is saying that in any given moment, and moment to moment, those binaries, those ideas that we have are always shifting. But what we've practiced as humans is to say it's only this and it's only that. And I don't want to live that way, and I don't think that we have to live that way. I think we can live in ways that require us or allow us or encourage us to be multi-dimensional in who we are. I think that's true as humans. I mean, when you look at nature, nature is really so diverse, what we call diverse. And we are in nature, but we have done this other thing, you know what I'm saying? And we need to be more in touch with the ways in which nature loves difference. Nature loves difference. But humans have gotten fucked up about difference. We have gotten like, you know, you can only be this or that. And that's really problematic for our future. And it's really problematic for the younger people coming up behind us. And we need to shift those realities. So I hope that I'm doing that in the work, and I hope that I'm pushing up against popular ideas. Like I think it's in the first parable, I actually say that Black lives do not matter. And I'm pushing up against this idea that Black lives matter. And one of the reasons why I say Black lives don't matter, because they never have. They never have in this society. So that's just the way it is. Or I say, Phil did not believe in the fuckery hope. Hope is a distraction. It's a distraction for Black people. If we were to do something else, if we had another verb as opposed to that word hope, what would we actually be doing? So I am deliberately pushing up against current ideas as a way to get us to think more openly about where we're going. I do, Preach Queen talks about when we've done with words, we make up new words. So there are new words in the work, because I think we have to keep making language. We can't, we can't settle. We can't settle for language as it is. So I really want the work to do things, because I'm interested in doing those things, to do things that are alive and that are powerful and that are queer. I have come to say more recently, I'm less interested in who's queer than in what's queer. And so when we push that, what do we get? When we push at that, what do we get? And I'm just thankful. I'm thankful that I'm still after, I'm going into 50 years of publishing. And I'm just really thankful that I'm still able and that I'm, still thinking about things, and I still want to think about things, and that there's still things that have to change in me as well. In me as well.
I think as a last question between us, one thing that you talk about in the intentions for the parables is that it is something that is meant to be felt more than necessarily read. And what are some of the things you want people to feel as they're working their way through the stories?
Well, one, I want people to feel uncomfortable. I want people to feel uncomfortable with their everyday sense of themselves, their everyday sense of gender, their everyday sense of language, their everyday sense of reading, their everyday sense of what a book is supposed to look like. How are you supposed to read a book? I want to, if we remain comfortable, then nothing's gonna happen. We have to be uncomfortable. And when we get comfortable, we have to say, oh wait, I'm comfortable. I need to change this around. Because we have to keep pushing, and we have to keep desiring, and we have to keep naming and renaming. And so basically, I hope you bought the book, and I hope you're uncomfortable. And I hope you say to yourself, why did I spend that money? And I hope you give the book to somebody else to read. And I hope it becomes part of a community way of really interrogating some of the ideas, some of the behaviors, some of the histories that we have ingested. I hope.
It will.
It
has already.
Thank you, baby.
Okay. We would love to hear from you all, what questions you have for Alexis and about the book. The floor is yours. Clark Kent.
Yes. Renee, how are you, Renee? I'm so happy you came out, baby. Yeah.
I was just wondering, speaking about gender, you seem to have somewhat of an evolved understanding of gender. Through writing this book, anything that challenged your idea of gender?
Specifically
With this book.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that this question around gender, not unrelated to race and sexuality, etc., but interrelated, is part of how humans are actually evolving. though that's not how we lay it out, but it's actually what's happening with us. And I hope that I'm proselytizing. The thing about an evangelist is that you have a philosophy that you are proselytizing around. So gender happens to be one of some part of my philosophy. I believe that I am proselytizing around, in part because I think that these questions will in fact free us, but we have to ask the questions. And we have to pose them with each other. I don't know that I'm particularly evolved. I know that I'm growing up as an individual. And I always say I'll be growing up until I'm gone, because I think that is the part of my particular evolution, my individual evolution, that's necessary for me as an artist, as someone who tries to imagine a different reality. So gender is just one of the questions I am posing, I think, for us to think about, especially those of us who identify as Black people, or Black diasporic peoples. Because again, for so long, we have not had the room to address these conversations, although we've been in these conversations from back in the day, from back in the day. When we think back to people like William Dorsey Swan, who was a drag queen in the 1800s, drag queen. So like, we ain't got nothing on William. You know, I mean, we're just living out the questions that have always been there. And that's really important for us to understand and to build on. So it's my hope that the writers who come behind me will look at this work, JesusDevil, the parables, and build on it, not see it as the place where we stop, but as a place that we can push against. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally love the idea and feel the idea of the ancestors speaking through us as artists, as they speak through you too.
Thank you.
And as the characters come to you, do they come genderless? How do the characters develop in your spirit? And does their premise come with them, or their place in the story come with them, or do they move around? Well, no, you should do this, and you should be here. How do they come to you, and how do they present themselves?
Thank you. Well, one, they didn't come as characters, they came as spirits. So that meant that they could do things that were not confined by these traditional notions of story and plot and character development. So they came, one, as spirits, and two, they came with their names. So once they showed themselves and they said, this is who I am, then they unfolded themselves. So, and there are, in the work, there are things that are repeated. So for example, overness is repeated in the work as a spirit, is at one point female looking, and then at another point male looking. There are colors that get repeated. There are names that get repeated, because these are aspects of the JesusDevil, the complexity of the divine. So I don't really remember any moment when it was on me to bring that forth. Again, it was my job to one, see who was coming, and to listen, and to understand that what we're calling gender was not exactly gender for the spirit. It was a way of being. And we don't really embrace that as humans. We don't really embrace that as readers. We haven't quite gotten there, but we're getting there. We just haven't quite gotten there.
So I took some notes that I wanted. Come on. You are juicy and kind and free and wild and sexy and very spirit aligned being. You're very trickstery. You're very vibrant and young. I mean, you're also like, ageless and kind of like, oh, you're from like the future in a lot of ways, right? And I think like so many people get that beaten out of them or like hurt out of them. And I'm not saying that maybe those attempts weren't made on you, but like how do you feel like, whether it's practices or just ways you hold and regard yourself, maybe it's just you came to the planet that way, but like how do you be that way?
Such a great question, Janelle. Thank you for all that exposure. I think that I have come to a place in life where I can say I'm loved, and that I am loved in my personal life, and I'm also loved in my community. And I didn't always have that. I did not always have that. And I think that there were times that my imagination suffered because I didn't have that. And I just didn't always have what I needed. It was there, but it was underseeded, if you will. That's a word. And I know that there are people here who know me a long time, who knew me when I struggled more than I do now. At the same time, all of that gave me this. So I can never not be connected to the times when I knew I was unloved, but I didn't have the tools to imagine what love could do for me. And one of the things that has gotten beat out of us as human beings is this thing we call love. It's gotten beaten out of us. It's been made unavailable to us. So it becomes unavailable to our imaginations and to our desires and to who we think we are and who we want to be. And I feel fortunate that I have been loved, and I know what it feels like. I feel fortunate. And that helps a lot when you're kind of freaky, when you kind of. Well, I was trying to measure. When you're a little freaky and you feel yourself a little different, and also if you feel yourself needy, all these things that we just get beat out of us. And that we don't give to others because we can't give it to ourselves. And I'm no more extraordinary than anybody in this room. I'm no more extraordinary. I'm not the exception. I am not. I'm just doing some work, like most of us are doing, some work. And I now understand what my part is. And I'm just trying to do that. I realize now that I'm not in the mainstream, and I probably never will be. And that has been a difficult thing to accept. But I got so much work that I gotta do. Fuck the mainstream. I got so much that I gotta do. And so much has been given to me to do. So I'm in my own stream. You know what I'm saying? In my own stream. We all in our own stream. So I appreciate that you know me all those ways, baby. I appreciate that. You didn't call me by my favorite name, though.
King Mama.
King Mama. Thank you. Thank you for that name. Thank you.
Any other questions? We could do one more.
Or comments?
Or comments.
Where'd you get the hat?
This is my Nolan's hat. And I got this hat at Gorin Brothers in Norland. And we walked into the hat store there one day, and this hat had been made for someone, but that person left it, never came back for it. And I was like,
That's your hat.
give me that. So this is all that black.
Yes.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes, dear. Mhm.
Well, I really appreciated the excerpts.
Thank you.
I can't even, like articulate one specific part of it, which is the entire flow of it,
Mhm.
how colorful and just multidimensional, like just kept slipping in and out of different
Mm.
voices and places. And I think it's not even so much a question, but maybe if you could speak a little bit about how New Orleans
Mm.
is the place that is that you operate out of, and how that
Mhm.
sort of influences that liminal, like you said, that multidimensionality, because I spent a little bit of time there myself, and
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, just
Mhm.
just a question about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, we lived there for 5 years. And as you know, having spent some time there yourself, I'm sure other people who've been to New Orleans know. New Orleans is a very hedonistic place. People go to get their freak on. And they go for a little while, and they party and they eat, and they party and they eat, and they pass out and they go home. Because they've had a good time. And I won't say that I went there unaware of that reality and or not wanting it, because I did. I will say though, having lived there, I came to understand New Orleans as an African city. It was very, very Black in all the ways that we think of Blackness, in terms of food culture, street culture, history, the history of enslavement, the history of voodoo, meaning the spiritual, the history of the ground itself, the environment, the ways in which it's rich and poor, the ways in which it's above ground and below ground. I mean, all of the binaries of urban life are situated in this African city that exists in the south of the United States. So I came to like a history of New Orleans that was trying to not duplicate what we already knew about New Orleans, but what I could feel. Like I lived in a neighborhood where brass bands practice on the street. Like, so when I'd be writing, I'd hear a brass band going down the street practicing. Or I lived in a neighborhood when it rained, you had to move your car because cars got submerged in rain, let alone flood, in rain. Or I lived in a neighborhood that was 2 steps away from the food desert. So I understood, when I saw people, I understood something about what they were dealing with. So I think I was constantly feeling New Orleans in ways that were complementary to, but also different from what I saw and what I heard about New Orleans. Like when there would be the Mardi Gras, I could feel the Mardi Gras not simply as a parade and a festival, but as a ritual of Blackness, as rituals of Blackness, which meant that I had to look at people in the streets and see how difficult life was on the daily, and see how they were carrying that life in this Mardi Gras moment, where visitors to the city would just be drinking and partying and not really understanding what exactly they were seeing or what they were feeling. So I was trying to, I took from New Orleans, both in the everyday and after we left, a sense of the importance of recognizing the Africanness of it and recognizing therefore how deeply spiritual and painful that spirituality can be in that city. Thank you.
Do you have any?
Yes, a little voice. Hi. Hi, Ashley. How you doing, baby? I do have an animal who lives with us, a canine. We don't call him a pet because he's made clear to us that he don't do tricks. So we can't treat him like that. We recognize that we have to give him more space in the house. We love him dearly and he loves us. His name is Woza Beans. And he lives emotionally on equal par with us in that he is a member of the family and he understands what his role is and we understand what his role is. And we've lived with him now for 5 years. Do you have any animals that you live with? Yes. Can you tell us something about your animal? Wow. That's an amazing name. And you get the second one.
How exciting.
Yeah. And you love living with this animal? Do your parents love living with this animal? Yeah. Oh, but Mama Bo doesn't like to touch him. And what about Mama Janata? She loves to touch you. Oh, well, I'm so happy that you're here, Isaac. It's good to see you again. Are you enjoying being in New York City? Yeah. What is the most fun you've been having? Oh, really? I told you not to take that chance.
I know you told me not to take her. I just see how you be doing things.
All right, baby. Well, I'm happy that you're here and that you're safe. Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful question. On that note, we are going to transition into the book buying and book signing and communal gathering and energy sharing part of the evening. But thank you all for coming. Thank you, Greg. Thank you to everyone who stayed late to keep this space open. We'll be here after we leave, and all the hands that will put it back together. Thank you for your time, and thanks to all these beautiful faces. And thank you to Alexis. Thank you.
So AK Press gave us some lovely prints, which are available with your purchase, that reproduce the cover and a line from JesusDevil. And I'm gonna bring up a table so Alexis can sign some books. Thank you, everyone, that joined us on